Yep.
Um,
Right. All right. Welcome back to Boss Uncaged podcast. So today, this is going to be like a unique episode because I'm looking at Edgar's background, and this is the
Lost you here for a minute. You still there? There we are. You there? My gosh.
you gotta love tech.
Gotta love tech. 1 second. Let's try that again. I lost you as soon as you went live. I lost you.
All right, so let's just flip it over. That's the beautiful part about tech, man. So whoever's watching live right now, you get to see a little bit behind the scenes. So welcome back to Boss and Cage podcast. Today's show is a guest that I'm really looking forward to interviewing because we have some similar backgrounds. He grew up as a graffiti artist in California, and then he kind of took that and made it into a business, and then that business stemmed into something else. So it was kind of like finding his core niche through 6 degrees of separation. So I always like to name whoever I'm interviewing a particular name, and today I'm going to name Edgar, the Modernist boss, and he just dropped off again.
All right, here we go. Hey,
That's
hey.
two. That's two. We're gonna go for three. We'll try it again.
Guess so. I don't know if it's me or you, or I don't know what's happening, but I'm
Yeah.
good to go now.
All right. So I'll start it over just for the general recording.
All right,
Welcome back to Boss Uncaged podcast. Today we're having some technical difficulties, and it's always funny as a podcaster. You just have to kind of run with it, right? So, as I was saying, Edgar is an individual that I was looking forward to interviewing because he has like a really diverse background and a similar background to my own. Most of you know that I started off with graffiti, and so did Edgar. And just like many graffiti artists over the years, you kind of figure out new things to do with your art, right? So you kind of jump into multiple things, whether you become a graphic designer, whether you become an architect, whatever it is. And Edgar follows that same exact path. So when it comes down to nicknaming Edgar, I'm going to nickname him the Modernist Boss. So without further ado, Edgar, why don't you talk to our audience and tell them a little bit more about who you are and what we're talking about today?
Yeah, hey man. I like the nickname, that's for sure. Yeah, you're right. I did grow up as a graffiti artist as a kid. I grew up in San Francisco. And I wasn't the best graffiti artist, but I was the most clever, and I had a whole crew of friends, and I turned it into a small business called Graffiti Graphics. And I was able to, go out and really sell the nightclubs and sell the walls and Lollapaloozas and the bands and all that, on this team that I had. And then, later on, I, parlayed that into a furniture business. I dropped out of high school and started my first furniture company. And that brings us all the way, here today. If we were to fast forward, 30, what is it, be 30 years, something like that, 35 years. I have a furniture company today. I make really the best, and I kind of use that old school graffiti vibe. Like,
Mm.
I am the sofa king, like, no joke. And we going, how it goes. You call yourself king of this, or I'm the king of that street, or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, I'm actually the sofa king, and I run a company called BenchMade Modern, and we sell some badass sofas, and really they are actually like the best online sofas, and that's no joke. And I take a lot of pride in that.
Cool. So, I mean, yeah, I think you definitely gave us a lot of things to unpack. So, the first thing I want to talk about, like, kind of going back to the graffiti, and I watched, a few of your other interviews. And the one thing I kept hoping for somebody would ask you, and I haven't heard it yet, was like, every graffiti artist has a tag name. What was your tag name back in the day?
Dude, you gotta say it like, yo, what you write, dude?
what, what you putting up, son? What you putting
From
up?
one graffiti artist to another. That's like a podcaster, that's never been to the streets. So
Yeah.
what was your tag there, sir? No, man, I was Blaze. I was Blaze TBC, the king of height. And and I, like I said, in San Francisco, the Booyah crew was my crew. And I spelled Blaze. It's funny enough. This is so stupid. It was BLA. My last name is Blazona, right?
Mhm.
Easy, Blaze, right? BLAZE. But no, I had to spell with an S so that my parents wouldn't know when they saw my name on the wall everywhere in the neighborhood. They would think it's, Blaze or something dumb like that. So I blew it on that one. I think I should have just taken the hit and gone with the Blaze with a Z.
Nice, nice. So I mean, obviously you have an art background, which is hell of cool for anyone that's in your industry. And again, you're talking about textiles, and I think you have a different keen eye than someone that's an interior designer. Like we look at paint, we look at colors completely different than the normal person. So like going back to like your upbringing, right? Were you more of like a spray can graffiti artist? Were you more of a black book? Were you more sandpaper on glass? Like what flavor did you tag in?
Yeah, I was a spray paint artist. We painted some pretty big ass murals. And like I said, I mainly painted for the clubs. We did all the skate contests that came through San Francisco. We got into, making our own skinny caps and fat caps
Nice.
and really fine tuning that whole process. And this is before you could go to the store. In fact, it was literally yesterday. I went online for the first time in my life. I bought an assortment pack of caps. Like that is the craziest thing. If you were a graffiti artist,
Yeah.
like back in the day, you'd have to get the Krylon crystal clear caps. We call them phantom caps, right? And you would go into the store and you would take all the tops off, and either someone already got them for it ahead of you, or you kind of was payday. And but nowadays you get this paint. It's graffiti paint, and you buy it at the graffiti store, and you get your caps all thin
Great.
and fat and all these crazy caps. It is so bizarre, how things have changed. I gladly paid the $9.99 instead of stealing them.
Yeah.
The whole deal is such a trip. But
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to kind of I see you lit up because I mean, obviously, I mean, anyone that has a graffiti background, I mean, it talks to your soul, especially in today's world. It's night and day difference. People are getting paid to do that art, right? So you took that graffiti art, and obviously, you grew up in a family that was full of entrepreneurs. So like, let's talk about that. Your
yeah.
family were essentially more in construction, but you're walking around bombing and tagging. Like, how did that work? I mean, like, kind of talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So again, back to San Francisco, my family was building restaurants and hotels and stuff like that. And I had a good family life. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I kind of wanted to lean on the other side. I like the street,
Hmm.
and again, I was this little white kid kind of growing up in this ghetto neighborhood, Lower Haight in San Francisco. It was pretty rough.
Hmm.
But I kind of use that as my cover. I could get away with a lot more by being this kind of uppity cute white kid, that could walk into a store and steal a bunch of paint and then go to a mural and then and then walk into a meeting and sell us on doing big murals, Lollapalooza. I mean, that was a big deal when we got that contract, and so it was it was a time when my parents weren't necessarily paying a ton of attention, but at the same time, I was revolting against them, right? I was an artist. There was no way I was going to be in the construction business, right? I was moving out. I was out of there. I had a car when I was 15. They didn't know it. For a year and a half, they had no idea I had a car. I had no license or anything, but I was just doing my own thing and acting as a little businessman. I mean, really, that was kind of the beginning of my business career. I mean, I had lemonade stands and watermelon stands and all that, going way, way back. But this was my first real foray in a business and making sure, with reasonable amounts of money, and then from there, the creativity, like you mentioned, I'm an artist, right? So how do I turn my art into something, right? And what's interesting about graffiti, and I think unless you're a writer, you don't necessarily understand this. There's so much of these tactics that are happening around us, right? Like sticker campaigns and postering and getting up. It's all the same, right? It's marketing. It's marketing 101. So how do I go out and market my business, right? And a lot of those guerrilla marketing tactics that we were doing back in the day are happening today in all sorts of businesses.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I mean, to your point about like the sticker campaigns, and I even take it to the social media aspect of it, right? I mean, who can get up the most frequently, be the loudest, be the biggest, be the boldest, do the most outlandish tag on the top of a building, or do like a fill-in piece upside down off the
Yeah,
train track, and you do it on camera now, and now that's what gets you your 15 minutes of
yeah,
fame.
yeah,
So with that, I mean, obviously you took that and you made it more into a business. And one of your pre-businesses before we even get into the furnitures was, I think you named it like a nickname was the backyard gorilla architect. So I wanted to
yeah,
like talk about like that business a little bit. Like, how did you come up with that concept for that business,
yeah.
and how did that stem from where you were?
You have modular dwellings, guerrilla architecture. So it was, again, it was a time when, I was a modernist. I've always been a modernist. I love this modern look and feel. And in the city filled with, Victorians and old houses, there wasn't really a true modern vibe, right? And so you didn't actually get to live in modernism. Yeah, maybe your kitchen was modern, or your bathroom was modern, or maybe you had some modern furniture in it, but your house wasn't modern, right? And so my whole thing was, how can I build architecture that is modern and through and through, like from the moment you enter the door into the space, the furniture, and so on. However, I didn't have a ton of money, and I've always been a build it first, draw it later kind of guy. And so for me, I started building these sheds. And if you Google my name, Edgar Blazona, Modular Dwellings, or MD100, you'll find all these modern buildings that I did, or that I sold a set of plans for. And all these buildings have come across the country, of people that have made their own buildings using my set of plans. And
Hmm.
so that was a real thing of like, how do I get this modern into play? And the guerrilla part was, I would set these buildings up on a street corner, and I would throw a party in them, right? And you could come and have a, cosmopolitan, and walk in and out of this building and have this vibe, this
Hmm.
swag to you that really like felt modern and felt crisp and new and exciting. And that's really what guerrilla architecture was to me.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a hell of a segue because I mean, obviously, you kind of remind me of like a hybrid of kind of like a well-known graffiti artist that had a baby with Frank Lloyd Wright, and then
Yeah,
you popped out and it was like, okay, I'm going to take the best of both worlds and I'm going to create furniture, right? So you're
yeah,
not just creating any furniture. I mean, you've been labeled like the best sofa online for a period of time, and it was named by multiple different magazines like New York Times and stuff like that. So I want you to kind of talk about like that journey. And I think you were saying something along the lines that you had to go to furniture college, but that furniture college was you traveling to the manufacturers to kind of figure
yeah.
out how to develop the furniture. So let's talk about that.
So there's something interesting, and I it feels really weird to talk in a business setting about these ways, and about these ways that I came up, because they're not necessarily your traditional way, right? I mean, I kind of had to come up as a little punk ass, right? I had to weave my way into these places, and in fact, my furniture college was Pottery Barn, right? I
Mm,
had to go get a job at Pottery Barn. I had to close this little business that I had down, and then I had to go get a job at Pottery Barn. Well, that wasn't good enough. So what? So I'm sitting in this office cube at Pottery Barn drawing furniture. Like, that's not good enough.
mm,
I needed to get into the factory. So how do I do that, right? So I had to create problems. I had to point out these problems, make a bigger deal of them, and then explain to these people how I was going to go to the factory in China
mm,
and fix them for them, right? This young dude who knows nothing really, I'm going to go tell Pottery Barn, this giant mega company and this mega factory, how to like change their business, but
mm,
I did. I was able to do that. And I found this little, I made people happy, and I was able to help these designers and these artists kind of create what they wanted to create, because they're paper drawers, right? They draw stuff on paper, right? I actually make things with my hands. And so I could kind of interpret what they wanted, and then go to the factory and then kind of like magic make it, and bring it back and be like, this is some good stuff. So for me, that was a way to kind of, use that ingenuity, or that different way around things than
mhm.
just a paper guy, to really kind of make a name for myself. And for a long time I did that. And frankly, I don't see things being all that much different now. I'm still this dude who's like, bobbing and shaking and trying to create, these things. I sometimes I feel like an imposter, but
Yeah.
I look around the room and I think I know more than anybody in this room about furniture. I've been there the longest. I might still be the youngest, right? This is a furniture company, it's a bunch of old dudes. I'm still the youngest, but I've actually been in the business much longer than they am, because I dropped out of high school and started a furniture company.
Hmm. So I mean, it's definitely interesting, and I love like painting the picture of your story, right? I mean, we're talking about graffiti, and again, most people they don't even understand like the real passion behind graffiti. And then you're like, okay, well, how do I take that and start making money? You start doing murals on walls, and then how do I take that? And then you said you dropped that business, then you jumped into Pottery Barn, and then you was like, even still, while you're working there, you're looking for your next opportunity. So that kind of leads me to direct to consumer, because obviously like that was the problem. The problem was trying to get particular furniture to someone in a shorter period of time, and then you kind of either stumble across it or did you figure it out?
Well, when I went to Pottery Barn, I knew, I look, I'm a modernist, right? I make modern stuff, right? I used to hustle on the sidewalk, man. I would set up my stuff on the sidewalk in front of the bar and sell coffee tables in front of the bar at night, right? But all modern stuff, right? And when I took that job at Pottery Barn, it was more of like a country vibe. And while they had some modern stuff, but it was more of this one kind of look. And so I knew I'd always have to get back to modernism. So I created a brand called True Modern. It was a wholesale brand. And so that was a big, interesting moment, right? I had all this furniture. Somehow I convinced this factory to, sell me a bunch of furniture for basically nothing. And I was able to import it. And then the 2008 crash happened. I had two warehouses, one on the East Coast, one on the West Coast, filled with furniture. And my sales stopped, right? It was a crash of 2008. And I realized, man, I need to figure out a better business model that doesn't have inventory. What can I do, right? And I started thinking, well, sofas, right? I started making these sofas, and even that was a hack. I mean, talk about a hack. I couldn't convince. I was in the modern kids furniture business at the time, brand called True Modern, right? I went to these sofa manufacturers, like, I'm gonna make sofas, and they were like, well, show us your sofa company. I'm like, well, here's my modern kids furniture company. And they're like, well, you got to have a sofa company to come, to get stuff from us. So I was like, okay. So I started buying sofas at cost. I had this like little guy making me sofas. They were my sofas, my designs, but I would buy them for like $2,000, just like I would sell them for, right? I would buy them for $2,000 and I would sell them for $2,000. I made zero money, right? But what I did was I built a sofa business that way. And so then I went back to that sofa company and I was like, here's my sofa company, right? And here's my stuff. He didn't know that I was buying them for $2,000 and selling them for $2,000. And they're like, okay, $1,000 a sofa. And I'm like, now I'm in the sofa business. And that started my direct consumer eye, right? I started to realize, as a wholesaler, if I could just get directly to the customer, but at that time, it was kind of a time when you were either a wholesaler or not. So I had to go out and start another brand on top of True Modern to be a direct to consumer. I couldn't cloud those two up because I needed the money that the wholesale business was driving in. And so I started BenchMade Modern, and slowly but surely I was in the sofa business and started to make a name for myself. And I started to make the best quality stuff I could. And that was really important. And that slowly, but all those guerrilla tactics and all that, I did all that stuff along the way with it.
So I think it's definitely interesting because I mean, obviously, like a household name that it could have been a competitor or you could have utilized them was, I guess, Wayfair, right? And Wayfair it kind of fits into that space, and they just don't sell sofas; they sell a little bit of everything else. Were you more of a wholesaler for them, or did you ever partner with them? How did that work with them being in the market at the same time?
Yeah, Wayfair was a good customer for me. I was very early on Wayfair. They had a brand called All Modern, and it was another spinoff. Wayfair used to be what was called CSN stores, and it was a bunch of different stores owned by one corporation, CSN stores. And so it was like, probably All Modern, probably Wayfair, some toilet brand and some other brand, on and on and on. And it all got consolidated later on to Wayfair. However, I was the wholesaler. I kind of brought back that splayed leg sofa that you see everywhere. It's a mid-century modern looking sofa. I was the first to kind of bring that sofa back into the light. And now you see it everywhere, of course. But that sofa did really, really well for me at All Modern. And that helped me, that wholesale business helped me, make enough to start to build BenchMade Modern. And again, like I didn't want to mess with that too much, right? I wanted to kind of keep those separate. And then as I built BenchMade Modern, I kind of put all my eggs into that basket later on.
I mean, I'm loving your story. I mean, obviously, it's kind of like not to say rags to riches, but I would say from paint to riches, right? So, I mean,
Yeah.
kind of talking about, yeah, for sure, for sure,
Right?
yeah. So, if you could define yourself, right? If you could, I mean, obviously, modernist is one of the words, but if you had an option to select three other words, right? What would those three words be to describe you?
Ah, man, crafty, right? I would say modernist. I would say crafty, uh, entrepreneurial. I guess those would be the three words. There's something that we missed in there though, in those three words that, it is about. There's this attitude that I have that I can't quite. And at times I don't even know if it's good or bad. It's this thing that kind of is like our whole brand thing right now is rebellious luxury, right? That's our tagline at BenchMade Modern, right? And so there's this thing inside of me that is rebellious, right? There's this thing inside of me that is, that's still that punk ass. That's still this. I'm 50 years old and I'm still like kind of this punk ass kid, but I'm in business. And so I've had to use that to kind of build my business, and a funny story. If you go to my Twitter account right now and you look at my pinned tweet, I'm actually at Edgar Blazona at Twitter, and I'm actually calling out other sofa manufacturers. Hey, sofa manufacturers, I know they all follow me. How about this? How about we both put up our best stuff? We send it to a writer, a magazine writer. You send your best stuff. I send my best stuff. Whoever wins, crown Sofa King publicly. Like, that's it. Like, I'm calling out these dudes, but no one wants to actually take that bait. And I don't know if that's like a good thing or a bad thing, but it's kind of part of who I am. And it's part of the brands that I'm building.
Well, I think it's part of like your original street swag, street credit, right? To I mean, the point to where if you're gonna buff someone's tag, and if they come back and buff your tag, whoever has the last buff wins the battle, right?
Yes.
So I mean, that's what you're doing right now. You're saying, okay, my tag versus your tag, my couch versus your couch. Whoever has the best one stands up and wins. So that's why I started off with graffiti, because again, that is you through and through. No matter what you're doing, that's the seeds that you grew up on. So with that demeanor, right? You're talking about you have like this. It's not an arrogance. It's just that's just your swag. That's just who you are, and you're willing to challenge the system. How does that have affected you when you walk into boardrooms or you walk into higher corporations and you're sitting in front of someone that may be 50, 60, 70 years old, but you have that swag and they don't? How have you overcome that over the years?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. It's changed. It's changed over the years. At one point I was the youngest in the room and I was able to use that to my advantage, right? It was not a cute thing, but it was definitely like, I was able to use that youngest. Now I'm not the youngest in the room, but I'm still the coolest in the room, right? In the furniture industry, there's a group of people that it's like, they're pretty old, right? Not everybody. It's a kind of a changing of the tide right now. You're starting to see, but I'm still, they don't know how to harness me in reality. And I don't necessarily, I have to be very careful in how I approach that because I'm the kind of loose cannon, right? And I have to make people comfortable with me first before I can kind of be, a looser cannon, right? I gotta show them that, I can play with you too, right? And I can sit with you and I can play, furniture executive really, really well. And then at the same time, I can kind of, play the more fun executive. We recently sold our brand, and the CEO of the company that acquired us, he said, I know we bought the disruptor, but man, you sure are disruptive, right? Like, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it's what I'm doing. And going back to that boardroom thing, like I just have to play it cool, because I do have to fit. Not everyone can go into the room and just be a punk ass. No one wants that. Like, you have to be able to back it up, and you kind of have to tone it down based on who you're with.
So I mean, obviously, you've been on this journey for a couple decades right now. So the idea of this conversation that we're having, somebody maybe hearing about you for the first time, and the perception of you being an overnight success may be a reality to them. But
Yeah.
how long have you been on your journey? Like compiling the years total.
I mean, like 35. No joke. I'm 50 now, and I left high school to start a furniture company. Right. I was working at Pottery Barn in the early 90s. Right. That was a long time ago. Right. So I was starting to be something, in the early 90s. And so no, it's not an overnight success. And frankly, it's taken me 30 years to be able to admit these things that we're talking about today. Right. I wasn't talking about this 30 years ago. Right. This was not who I was trying to be. In fact, I was kind of hiding this stuff, right? Because I had to play into the room. Right. Now, not so much. Now I can be a little bit more me, but I had to really button up my tie and go in there. And as an artist, I had to still shine. Right. But I didn't have to, it's funny as an artist, right? We are protected, right? You got to protect the artist, like, his feelings and his demeanor, like, is this environment good for you? All that stuff, right? It's kind of like silly in a sense, like I'm just a regular guy, right? But, you kind of get to play into that just a little bit.
So let's play off of that, right? I mean, obviously you're into breaking eggs, right? I mean, obviously those eggs turn in, you're gonna bake them, you're gonna make cakes out of them. But again, you're breaking eggs left and right intentionally because that's just kind of who you are, and you want to disrupt the system to a certain extent. So my next question is based upon if you can go back in time, right? Is there anything that you would want to change, or is there any time frame that you would go back if you had a 5 minute window to
Yeah.
whisper in your ears to say to change something? What would you do? What would you say, and when would you go back?
Yeah. That's a great question too. I want to make it clear that I am not just about breaking eggs, right? I'm willing to break an egg,
Hmm.
right? I'm willing to break an egg to see what's inside it,
Okay.
right? But I'm not just breaking an egg just to break eggs, right? There's a real difference there, and I don't want it to be perceived one way versus the other. I think, do I want to understand how the engine works in the car? Yes, right? Do I want to be the mechanic and constantly take it apart? No.
Mm.
Right? Do I want to like change the tire from round to square? No, I don't, right? I get it, right? I understand there's a reason why some of these things are the way that they are, but I am very curious what's in the tire, right? What keeps it, inflated, right? What how does that work? And so when I look back and I think about what could I have changed, I maybe could have listened more, right? There could have been some moments that I listened more. I had a great mentor, a guy by the name of Gary Friedman, and Gary Friedman is the CEO of Restoration Hardware. He was my CEO at Pottery Barn when I was there. He created Pottery Barn. He made it what it was in the 90s, and then later made Restoration what it is today. And this guy really kind of changed some of the things, some of the mentalities that I had at the time. And I maybe could have listened more when I was younger, right? I could have maybe gone along with the program a little bit better, right? I could have just bit my lip a little more and gone along with it. So I think if I look back, maybe there wasn't one moment. I think just in general, maybe I broke too many eggs. Maybe I let that get a little too far, and I should have just listened a little more.
Hmm. I mean, kind of going back to the breaking egg thing. I mean, to your point, you're breaking eggs with intentions to figure out how to modify, update. You're doing it with purpose. And I think one of your things that you broke eggs on in your journey was the 24-hour turnaround time, right? Being able to have a sofa be created and delivered within 24 hours versus everyone else was taking 5 to 6 weeks. So again, you're breaking eggs with intention. But I want to talk about like how did you even perceive a 24-hour turnaround time like that? You broke a fucking dozen eggs by doing that, right? So like
Yeah.
how did that pan out?
Yeah. Yeah. Impressed with your homework, by the way. Nice work. You did your background. When I did the 24-hour thing, it was I mean, no one took me seriously. No one. I had to build my own factory so I could raise money, so I could prove to the world that I could make a sofa in 24 hours.
Hmm.
Right. And I learned that. I watched sofas being made in 24 hours.
Hmm.
Like I saw that. I saw that in factories. It doesn't even take 24 hours, right? It takes 6 to 8 hours,
Hmm.
right? So why does it take 6 weeks to get furniture made? Like, what is it that takes so long? So that was the question that I was probing. And I learned a few things, right? Like, yes, I can make you a sofa. You could tell me right now, what sofa did you want? I could make some calls. And literally 6 hours from now, that sofa would be done. I could send you a photo of it, and it would be just as nice
Hmm.
as if I took 6 weeks. It would be no difference, right? But what I realized was people don't even want a sofa in 24 hours, right? They don't want a custom made sofa in 24 hours because the perception is it can't be as nice,
Hmm.
right? So when I started doing these things, people were like, well, it must be a shitty sofa if, restoration hardware is 8 weeks, and you're making it in 24 hours. Like, how could it be good? And that is really, really not true. And I proved that, right? I know that that's not the case. But so there's this customer perception, and so that was really the thing that I was fighting. And yeah, I did break eggs. The reason why it takes 6 weeks is because the line's long, right? You know
Hmm.
why the line's long? The line's long is because we have these ordering processes in place where we don't even know if we have the red fabric. When you come into our store or whatever, you order a red sofa, the salesman's like, sure, yeah, we get it right for you. They don't know. They don't know if we have red fabric. I don't know if I have red fabric. In fact, I have to reach out to the mill and have red fabric and get red fabric. In fact, I might even reach out to the mill and have red fabric made,
Hmm.
literally woven for that sofa. So I kind of had to jump around all those hoops, find better ways, right?
Hmm.
Only have fabrics that are managed inventory. I mean, it's not rocket science, right? Don't sell sofas with fabrics that you can't get your hands on tomorrow. Like, what does it take to know that? And so those are the things that I was pushing against. So while I'd love to take like a lot of credit from, doing sofas in 24 hours, we did a few things that were magic, but not really. We just kind of looked at the whole process and rearranged it, right? And
Hmm.
and just said, hey, look, I'm not comfortable with a sofa that takes 6 weeks. I don't even want it anymore by the time it gets there. I don't even want that red color anymore. I'm over it at that point. And so I think that's the eggs that I was breaking, right?
Hmm.
Asking the question, why does it take 6 weeks? And why are we okay with this?
I think you made a solid point. I mean, the fact is you're not just making any sofa. You're making custom sofas, and it kind of goes back to your upbringing, right? And correct me if I'm wrong. I think like your dad was essentially making like custom tables and selling them with houses and stuff like that. So you grew up in an entrepreneurial household that gave you an opportunity to realize that you could break eggs and turn them into
Yeah.
cupcakes and turn them into cakes and turn them into pies without having to hesitate, without the fear behind it. So my
Yeah.
next question on top of that is, like today, being that you had that upbringing, how do you then currently manage like your work life with your family life, considering that like you're that high energy individual?
Yeah. Um, well, you're correct. My father was making these things, and it taught me that you didn't have to settle for what came off the shelf,
Mm.
right? You didn't have to just, you know buy that vase. You could go and have to a pottery maker and have a vase made, right? You could find ways to create these things that you had in your life that were available to you. You didn't have to just go down to any old store and pick what they happen to have because you need a vase, right? Same thing with furniture, and then you go back to the question of, how do I deal with my family and my life and all that? I mean, look, I am a high energy person, and I'm incredibly creative, right? So a lot of what we do, and my life is about creativity, right? And there's a lot of things that it just so happened that I picked a wife that's okay with all of that, right? Yeah, I'm a baseball dad, and yeah, I take my kids skiing, and I do all these things with my kids and whatnot, and I have to do that, and I learned that I had to protect my family, right? That was probably the most important thing, was that yeah, I could go out and I could get a new job, or I could start a business, I could crash the car, whatever, but I couldn't crash my family, right? That's the most precious thing that I had. It's the hardest thing to build, right? And so I find that to be very, very important. And I'm not the best dad at times. I'm not the best husband at times, but I do know its importance. And you can only hit the fail button so many times with them, and they need to be protected.
I mean, I like the way, I mean, like the articulation of the way you define that. It kind of tells me that everything you're doing. I mean, obviously your family comes first and foremost, right? And I would think that if your battery was like a power plant, you're the battery inside that power plant. So you're protecting your family, but ideally, when you're protecting yourself on a day-to-day basis, what kind of routines do you have in the morning per se when you wake up?
Yeah.
It kind of helps you get ready for your day.
Yeah, I don't, right? That's the thing. People ask me that all the time. I wish I did, right? I started looking at all these guys, Russell Simmons comes to mind. I mean, there's a whole bunch of people that meditate, right? It's a big part of their lives, right? And if you look around, there's a lot of really successful, famous people, but forget famous, they're successful, right? And they're successful because they meditate. And so I try that for a minute, and that doesn't work, right? For me, it's about creativity, right? It's about feeding that creative side. Do I do it in the morning? Not necessarily. Do I make things constantly that I still make things constantly, right? I'm out there in the backyard last night cutting down a table with a grinder and welding it, taking 4 inches out of the top because I told a friend that I'd make him an outdoor dining table, I don't know, a couple months ago, right? And so here I am, I'm grinding, I'm cutting, I'm welding, I'm still out there doing that stuff. And while I was, cursing his name last night, it is one of those things that keeps me going. It's that creativity. And so while it's not in the morning, my art is making stuff. And I still do that, on a pretty much daily basis, on a really regular basis. And if I'm not doing the work, I'm thinking about the work. It's definitely a part of my day.
I think it's definitely interesting. So, I mean, you don't have a general morning routines, but obviously you wake up and you get rolling, you get going. And I think I had listened to like one of your interviews, and this next question is about books. And I forgot the name of the book, but it was a book that you read when you was a kid, and you was like, that book got you. Like that book woke you up to let you know that you was an artist. So my next question is a three-part question. Like the first part is, the name of that book, if you want to recommend that book to our audience. Number two is like, what books are you actively reading right now? And number three is, have you had an opportunity to author any books as of yet?
Yeah, so that book is called High Tech. It's a coffee table book. And it was a book in the late 80s. It was about taking industrial items and putting them in a home, right? Taking an aluminum scaffolding, a brand new aluminum scaffolding, and creating, on one level a bed, on another level a desk, a ladder going to each of them, and then put that whole thing in a room in a house. a manhole cover, polishing a manhole color, chroming it, turning that into a coffee table, things like that. Industrial rugs, felt, big heavy felts, and how to turn a heavy felt pad into a rug, and all these cool things. And a lot of these things you've seen later on, but it really inspired me. It really inspired me to take these objects and turn them into everyday objects. I still love that book, right? That book still inspires me, and it was a book that I grew up as a kid. It was my parents' coffee table book, but it really, really inspired me. So what books am I reading today? None. Like, I don't really read books, and I'm a bit ashamed of that in a way. I don't have the time. I don't actually think that the books make me smarter, right? Because for me, it's about creating the art, right? It's the art. It's the experience of the art. It's about designing. It's about creating an environment around me. So, have I been able to author anything? No, but I kind of build these environments and these spaces around me. And even for people, going back to the guerrilla architecture days, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was building these spaces for people to feel modernism through and through. So that's kind of in a long way, my creativity and my authoring, so to speak, of an environment.
Well, I mean, I think definitely you're also a textile junkie as well too. I mean, like this entire podcast, you've been talking about textures, you've been talking about materials, you've been talking about fabric, and I think you rolled that into your business as well too. I mean, your business, you guys send out a swatch box, and that kind of helps build the trust with your clients because again, you're not talking about a $200 couch. So I want you to talk about like that methodology behind how did you come up with saying, okay, we're going to sell a premium product, and the way to buy into that premium product is to give them something that's shipped in 2 to 3, 4, 5 days that has all the high quality materials in that box.
Yeah, that's a good little trick of mine, right? First in the door. I don't know who I heard that from. Probably Gary Friedman of Restoration Hardware, right? The book is going to be first in the door, right? When we launch this thing, we're going to be first in the door. So when you come to my site, BenchMadeModern.com, you go to the swatches page, you hit the all button, you put your address in, and 2 days later, this giant box with 100 swatches comes, leathers, fabrics, velvets, all that, big pieces with, thread counts and all the information, the cleaning information and all that. My philosophy was, if I can be the most badass into the room first,
Mm-hmm.
you're going to get this little envelope from some other guy who's selling you a $2,000 sofa. My sofas are not $2,000, right? So you're going to kind of look up to my stuff, right? You're going to look at, man, I wish I could get that one. Can I afford it? Gosh, we're only going to buy it once. Maybe we should spend the $4,000, and so I'm kind of playing into that a bit, but at the end of the day, it's not trickery. Like, I have really good fabrics. I have really good materials inside the sofa. I always tell my team, I say, if we're going to spend, let's just say $1,000 on foam for a sofa,
Mm-hmm.
if we spend $1,200, we can get the best foam. So why would we not spend the extra $200 and get the best foam and make sure that the sofa never comes back because of a foam issue, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've used that at every turn. So unfortunately, I have the most expensive materials in my sofa, right? But I don't get any, thing back on the frame. I don't get anything back on the foam, because I put the best stuff in it. And that translates from the swatch set, right? It's all this just kind of triggering these things, right? Like, if I can just trigger this thing in your head that says, wow, this is badass, right? Even by the time you get to sofa, you're like, it's going to be badass. Like, there's no chance it's not going to be badass because look at this swatch kit, that kind of thing. And we take that one step farther. I don't know. Did you see the printouts? Have you seen that button? You can go to the printout page, and this is a little trick of mine. You'll love this. I send out a full scale drawing of whatever custom size sofa you want. Giant rolls of paper. So you bought you want a corner sectional, you want an 100 by 90, whatever it is, of this one particular size or collection. I'll send you a piece of paper, 2 giant pieces of paper. You roll out onto the floor to make the sectional. You can see the cushion layout. You can lay on the floor on it. You can see, does my head and my feet fit in between the arms? Does my family fit on the sofa? And you can really kind of visualize what that sofa is. And it's those little tricks that I think help, sell our product and make us a little bit different than everyone else.
Well, I think in addition to that, I mean, obviously, earlier on you were talking about being the sofa king, and like you ever think about like graffiti back in the day, you put crowns up, you put the angels on top, you always put the
Yeah.
arrows, you're always pointing to me, I'm
Yeah.
oneer. So being like number one in that seat, right? I
Yes.
think part of your sub branding is the same because you use luxury a lot. Like I think you have a sub brand for your guard called Lux Guard, and
Yeah.
that's kind of playing into that whole crown thing. So I want you to kind of talk about like your micro branding a little bit because again, you have the macro, right? You have like the big scale. You're delivering this package. You're delivering the roll. You're delivering these premium couches. But even on the small little nuances, like the way you're describing your guard, like how did you come up with that?
Well, that's a good point. That it's interesting you pick up on that. So nice detail, right? You see that, right? And you're right. It does go back to the background, and it kind of, I mean, if you say it, like I always go back to, America's best burger, right? The number one hamburger in all of San Francisco. Like, how are you the number one hamburger in all of San Francisco? You're not, but you said it, right? And you must live it, right? You must stand proud of your hamburger, right? And so I found that to be really interesting all of my career. And it does go back to the graffiti days. I was King Blaze King 1, right? I mean, I did all that stuff, right? And so yeah, I do carry that over. And I am the sofa king, as stupid as that is, right? Like I really do feel that way. Like, an actual sofa king. Like, what is an actual sofa king? How stupid is that? But I feel like, what? I make really good product and I can live on it. I can live with that. Like it's not just stuff that I'm selling. I haven't always been the sofa king, right? It was a time then when I wasn't, right? I made some shitty product, and I was learning and I was making stuff. I was trying to figure my price point, my materials and all that. And I had to learn. And now I really feel confident in that. And I think that carries over when you talk about the Lux Guard. Like, how do you name things? Branding is so important. Signaling is even more important, right? And so, one of the things that we do that you'll see is we put big windows, right, in everything. Big windows mean fancy, right? Luxury. Like only the best houses with luxury have floor to ceiling windows, right? So that's a weird little signal that we do. When you're an aspirational buyer, right? And you're like, you want your house to look like that magazine and you want to be one way, there's something that's very aspirational when you see these rooms and you're like, oh man, like I want my house to look like that, right? I want a big window, but you have this little window with this little molding all the way around and some little dumb little curtains, it doesn't look like anything like that at all, but you want your house to be like that. And so again, it's all about signaling and it's all about, we use that word rebellious luxury, right? Why are we rebellious, right? Because we're pushing against the norm, right? But we're luxury, right? Do I want to go out and get a latte with my sofa? No, I don't. I want a good sofa, right? I want a luxury sofa, but I like the luxury, right? I like that it feels good and it has this feeling to it, but I don't want all that other stuff, right? I want a nice sofa. I'll go get a latte somewhere else that actually makes really good lattes, right? And so I kind of look at this whole thing like that, and again, it all goes back to signaling.
So I mean, talking about signaling, and like you said, I mean, you like the whole thing is more so you're making more of an environmental thing. It's not just about the physical item; it's about the emotional side effect, how someone feels in it. But again, going back to like the swag, and then obviously you have like the psychology behind it, and you're playing off of both of them. And I think one of your actual names for your sofas was like the like butter module. And it's kind of like you think about it like old term, like that's like butter, that's smooth. But you're playing into that. You're talking about how smooth this leather is, how smooth this couch is. So first of all, I just want to say like the fact that you're still bringing in like the urban textures of the terminologies into the modern swag is sexy as fuck. It's sexy as hell because again, most people they're not going to see that. They're just going to be like, "Well, it's smooth like butter. I just want to sit on it." But they don't realize that you're tagging them. They don't understand that you got a spray paint in your hand and you're bombing on them while they're standing there drooling on your sofa.
Yeah. Pretty intuitive. Yeah, I like that stuff, right? I like to find the signaling, right? Again, it's and some people get it and some people don't, right? If you look at our fabric names, right? These are all designers and places that are signaling kind of undercover. Our leather, Marfa leather, right? That's all about Marfa, Texas, Donald Judd, right? He's a hero of mine. The skinny fat sofa, our best-selling sofa, right? That was my childhood nickname, right? I was the skinny kid. No, I was the fat kid that could get away from the cops like a skinny kid, right? And so people would be, oh, that dude's skinny fat, and so and I was like, well, this sofa has skinny arms and fat cushions, right? The skinny fat, and so it's those little things, and most people don't know that. I know it. A couple of friends know it. The like butter thing, the OG couch potato. It's those things that kind of signal a different vibe, right? It's not so stuffy, right? Can you imagine these people in their homes, and they're like stubby homes, right? And they're like, yeah, man, how about the OG couch potato, or like, right? Like the like butter, and some people get it, like you get it, right? Some people don't. And then some people do, and we get these emails like, man, you guys get the best names. And because we're okay, right? Do you know why everything is named after a freaking street, right? It's because you can't, you go to any store, it's either a street or a city, right? The reason for that is because you can't trademark that. So we all name our stuff Manhattan, right? Because it's not trademarkable, right? You can't get in trouble for having a Manhattan. Well, then it's boring as shit, right? You have no brand, you have no nothing, right? So for me, it's about, putting on these things like, it's soft like butter, smooth like butter, it has this feeling to it. And then I just kind of vibe off of some old lady, in the middle of nowhere with her like butter sofa telling her friends, Yeah.
Oh man, that is hilarious. So I mean, like how it brings me to like technology for a bit, because I mean, we haven't talked about that as of yet, and your back end of your current model is obviously drop shipping, and you're using Shopify. So like, why did you pick that platform out of all the platforms in the world? And obviously, Shopify is a big household name brand, and obviously they're good. They're good across the board. But I mean, you could have made custom. You could have made your own. Why did you go with Shopify?
Yeah, I did have custom. I did make my own. I mean, this is probably site 8.9, something like that. Like we're pretty deep. And I did have my own site before that, made from scratch, basically built on the Magento platform. The interesting thing about Shopify in particular, well, there's two things. One, Shopify is not an open platform in the sense that it's more like Apple, right? Where you can't just get an app and put it on there, right? You have to, it has to go through a vetting process and all that. So it makes for things that don't break as much. I don't think people realize how much a site breaks, right? How often things constantly are needing updating, brokenness. When you have just a simple site, selling 5 things, whatever, you could use Facebook and build a site, it's like nothing. But when you have a complex site and is doing all kinds of things and, pulling pricing, there's this thing called variants, right? Shopify has a variant rule, 100 variant rule. I have like 200,000 variants, right? I mean, I when you think about it, I got red sofa, brown leg, 90 inches, red sofa, brown leg, 95 inches, red sofa, brown leg, red sofa, white leg, 95 inches. I mean, there's so many variables there, and Shopify doesn't support that. And so we've had to build some pretty serious workarounds in order to be on that platform. It's still worth it in the fact that it doesn't break as much. Shopify is a platform that is that is it's pretty easy to use. There's developers, there's plenty of developers. I'm always looking for places in other parts of the country where the cost of living and the hourly is a little less, right? So we have a team in Canada that handles our Shopify stuff, right? Shopify is from Canada, it's like, and it's a great way to, we work all throughout the world. And I love Shopify. Shopify has done really, really well for us, but it's not, don't get me wrong. There's nothing not custom about our site, right? There's no template on our site. Maybe at one point there was like, we started with be cool. And then no, we can't do any of that. So.
I think it's very cool. I mean, obviously, you're leveraging a platform for its stability, which is, it makes perfect sense because most SaaS platforms nowadays, if they're going to scale, they're going to have to go through the hurdles of things breaking on a routine basis, left and right. So you already surpassed that. So let's just take that words of insight, that words of wisdom that you just dropped, and let's personify that a little bit, right? Just say I'm a younger kid. I walk around with a Magnum 44, and it's not a gun; it's a marker, right, in my book bag, and I'm tagging and I'm catching up, and I hear this podcast, and I'm like, well, maybe furniture is not my thing, but I want to do something with my graffiti. What words of wisdom would you have for that individual to help them to move forward and be successful?
Yeah, it's all about marketing, right? And and I don't mean marketing like I've paid Facebook, right? I don't mean that Facebook ads or Google ads or whatever. There's a reason why famous artists, the artists that we know, the artists that we've heard of before, the musicians that we've heard of before, there's a reason why they're famous. There's a reason why we've heard of them. And it's not because they were the best musician or the best artist or the best tagger or the best graffiti artist, street artist, right? It's because they were good at marketing themselves, right? And I think that's the most valuable thing that anyone could do, no matter what size business is that they're doing. Even an influencer, right? An influencer is the best at marketing, right? They've figured out ways to kind of, weave their way into the conversation, right? So what I would tell that little tagger, with the Magnum 45 or the oh man, there's so many names come back, the Sakura marker or the ultra wide,
Yes, sir.
wide when I inked myself, man. So what would I tell that guy? I would say look for ways to set yourself apart, right? You can't just be a tagger. There's tons of taggers. You can't just be a graffiti artist. There's tons of graffiti artists, right? It's a tough road. So what can you do to be different, right? Off the top of my head, I'm the paint on cars guy. Right? I paint cars. Like that's my thing. Not illegally, but I acquire cars and I paint a sick mural and I've set them up in a, parked in the middle of some, weird, courtyard, right? That's my thing, right? So right there, I just came up with a quick little thing to make you different than every other tagger or graffiti artist out there in the country, right? So what are these ways that you can kind of set yourself apart, right? Your art has to be good. No joke. You can't just have shitty art and be putting it on a car and putting it in some courtyard and expect to be famous, right? It doesn't work like that. But you got to find a way to break above the noise. And so the web, right? Graffiti artists these days, man, those kids, they don't even paint on the streets anymore. They paint in these crazy little, alleys and these crazy little tunnels that no one ever is going to see except for that one photograph that they took and they got it out there, right? But now there's a million kids doing that, right? And now they're worldwide and there's a million kids doing that. So how do we be different? I think that's really the key. I think that's what people underestimate is why is this one kid more successful than I am, but I'm better than him, right? He's more successful than you because he's better at marketing himself. And so you got to find your way above the noise.
Very cool. So, I mean, with that, how does someone find you on the internet? I mean, do you want to send them to like your social media profiles?
No, they got to go to BenchMadeModern, to check out, our sofas, of course. I'm on Twitter, Edgar Blazona at Twitter. Any Google search for Edgar Blazona online will find all kinds of stuff. I love doing an image search. You find all kinds of cool stuff I've done over the years. It's amazing. It's like the best portfolio you ever had in there. So, they can find me there and reach out LinkedIn. I get a lot of inbound on LinkedIn. I try to answer people for the most part, I'm pretty giving. I try to be helpful. I reached out to a ton of people and got no reply, and that sucks, And so I'd rather just say, hey, or hey, I can't answer this right now, but thanks for reaching out. So I'll do whatever I can to kind of give some words back.
Very cool. So that kind of brings me to like the like bonus round. I got a couple of bonus questions for you, right? One of them, again, because you have so many different achievements, which one is your most significant one to date?
Well, I think this set of plans, when I did these modular buildings, everyone was rushing to the prefab movement, right? Let's get these buildings down, these nice houses down to $100 a square foot. And I'd be in these New York Times articles, be like this architect, and then at the bottom, Edgar Blazona and his sheds, I was always this dude making sheds, right? And I'm not an architect either, but I started building these buildings, and then I couldn't ever get this price down to a certain point. And so finally I sold the plans through a magazine called BenchMade Magazine. And so this MD100, it was a 100 square foot little shed, plan set that I built. Unfortunately, I think that's going to be my legacy, right? Because if you Google search that, you'll find these buildings all over the country. And I hope that's really not my legacy, but it feels like maybe it will be. I do think I'm making a name for myself in the sofa world. And so my greatest achievement is, look, it's probably being the sofa king, right? I mean, it wasn't easy to get here. And so that's probably my greatest achievement, but unfortunately, I'll probably be known for these sheds that have happened across the country.
So I mean, it's interesting that you bring up the sheds. Do you think that they're more so like they fall into the category of like tiny homes? I mean, like what flavor and like what's the use case analysis for those?
Yeah, well, I helped create that tiny home movement, right? It was me and a guy named Jay Schaefer, who basically created these little environments, and we reminded people that things didn't have to be giant and huge, right? My sheds were these backyard offices, basically secondary rooms, right? Guest rooms, that sort of thing. And so that's what they fall into, right? They fall into this secondary, glass and wood structure, out in the backyard, a modern environment for you to kind of vibe out to and chill out to. And while a tiny home is similar, and I definitely built some, things with bathrooms and kitchens and all that. But these sheds were just a modern box that you could go out and do your work or watch TV or whatever. So
Very
I
cool.
think that was really my thing back then.
Very cool. So my last question for you I will say is my signature bonus question. If you could spend 24 hours with anyone, that person could be dead or alive, uninterrupted for those 24 hours, who would it be and why?
Gosh, I think it would have to be Donald Judd. Donald Judd, if you don't know who he is, he was the kind of was the modernist, minimalist modernist artist from New York. He created a place called Marfa, Texas. Well, Marfa, Texas is a town, but he started, buying up buildings in Marfa, Texas, and created what we now know as Marfa, right? And he built these buildings. He put all this art. He invited all his artist friends into this town, and they just took common places. They bought the army barracks and redid it with all this great art, and I'd want to spend time with him, not because, if you go and look him up, Donald Judd, minimalist artist, and you'll find all this stuff, and you probably be like, oh man, what's that? Like, that's nothing. It's a plywood box, right? But he did it in a time when he was pushing the limits. He was pushing the boundaries of quote unquote art. I think I'd like to go back to him and say, how much of that was intentional? Like, did you really see through all that? like, were you really doing all this stuff that everyone thinks you're so brilliant today? Or were you just doing your own shit and it just somehow made it? And you made it, and now everyone thinks you're brilliant. I think those are the things that I would like to ask. Like, how much of it was, reflection of who you are, and how much was it actually like you kind of foreseeing that movement and that period in time when there wasn't much as modernist architecture and art.
I think that's a hell of a intriguing answer, because I mean, the way you're describing him, he kind of sounds like the furniture variation of Basquiat, like kind of like pushing the limitations, simplifying the art down until where it's so simplistic it looks like a kid could do it, but there's so much meaning and depth, and there's so much richness in it. And once
Yes.
you have to understand art, you can really see it.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. But then take that back and then think of snobby, artists, art critics in New York, right? That are like criticizing and, is it art? Is it not art? Like,
Yeah.
did you foresee that, or were you just building some stuff because you thought it was cool and that just became that? Like, that's what I would love to know is how much of that did you really, was the plan versus this is just what I did and what I was doing.
Nice, very cool. So going into closing, man, I think if you're not a podcast host, by all means, I think you should be, because I mean you have the charisma, you have the swag, you have the energy level. So if this is your first opportunity, I want to make you the host of the Uncaged podcast. My show is now officially yours. Interviewing me. What questions do you have?
Well, man, I want to know what you wrote. What you write, dude?
Funny enough, if you look at the first three letters of my name, SAG, and you add an S at the end, I was originally Sags. So I kind of brought it into the full circle and brought it into like my new alias. So
And where was that? Where'd you write?
Brooklyn.
In Brooklyn. Yeah. Those are good times, man. I had some good friends out there, and big ups to New York and Brooklyn and all that. That was quite the time. It was like San Francisco, LA, and New York, and it was the place to be. I mean, you guys were like the founders. We would look up to you. That lettering technique would come down. It would get kind of passed down, from New York to California, and then we would spin it off in one way. It was some good times back then. So I would want to know about that. I'd want to know, like, what's it like to be a podcast guy? Like, no, really, not like, don't give me this, well, what books did you read? Like, no. Like, what is it really like? Like, does it suck? Is it like, oh, I gotta prepare for this? I mean, you obviously did a lot of preparation for this, and I appreciate that. In fact, I haven't necessarily seen that. I've done quite a few interviews and I haven't seen that. So that's something. I mean, for real, like, you're doing something different than most. So what's it like? What's it, what is it a drag on your family? Is it how much of your mental capacity does it take to do what you do?
So it's kind of like, and again, we speak graffiti, right? So in the early days of graffiti, like when you're first tagging, it's more difficult, right? You're trying to get your hand style, you're trying to figure out how to use a can, you're trying to figure out your tips, you're trying to figure out your markers, you're drawing in the black book, and you're practicing the art form. But then as you get seasoned with it, that shit comes naturally. You give me a random can and you hit a wall and you start splashing the tip and you getting all this other things that people are looking like it's a miracle, but you're passionate. You love what the fuck you're doing. So every time you wake up, you're looking for that next tag, that next bomb, that next fill-in. So for me, I look at that as podcasting. It took me 3 years to get to where I'm at, but to your point, like the research that I do behind the scenes is because I love doing it. I love getting into the psyche of the person before I even meet them, because we only have about an hour, so I want us to make that bond. Real bond in that 1 hour time versus being some superficial bullshit and I'm asking you staged ass questions and then you're just kind of like another damn podcast. Fuck that. And again, I'm breaking eggs in my own way to a certain extent, but I like doing that because again, the feedback that you and I and the communication, the synergy that we have, we wouldn't have had that if I didn't come to the table like that.
No, you can tell, and that's cool. A lot of people are, as I'm giving the answer, they're looking down and they're reading the next question. And it really is makes for a tough interview, and it makes for a tough bonding. and boy, it doesn't bring out the best in me, that's for sure. So it's cool it's cool what you do, really. Props, like it's cool what you do. Nice work.
Yeah, well, I definitely appreciate it, man. So again, you're the host. You got any last questions, or are we signing off?
Well, let's see about that shirt. Purpose, attitude. What else you got there? Purpose, attitude, spirit, strength, intensity, obsession, and nerve, passion. Right? What's this shirt about? Did you just buy this, or did you make that, or what is it?
Oh, just like you, Shopify store. So I mean, I have about 350 shirts that when they pop into my head, I'll just literally come up with a quote, come up with something, throw a design together, and ask my team to upload it. So over the past 3 years, I have maybe like, I don't know, 64 different shirts with breaking down of what I like to look as not the stereotypical definition of the words.
Huh. That's cool. That's cool. See, you're still creating. You're still doing your art. I like making shirts too. I make modernism for life, right? And it's all like modernism for life, yo. Like this is my shit, and it's for life. Like I didn't just come into modernism last week because it was cool because West Elm made it, right? This is my stuff for life. And so I have shirts like that. People are always like, "What is that shirt?" It's like, these are some shirts I made like 10 years ago. I made way too many. I thought I could
Yeah,
sell.
yeah.
So
Well, I love it, man. Every once in a while, like when I have some downtime, I'll throw up a little piece in the black book, and you can kind of see like that book bag, the two book bags behind me, the two shoes. Those are pieces that I tagged up in the black book, scanned them in, and turned them into product.
That's cool. That's cool. That's cool. Well, that's a wrap, man. I don't got any more questions for you. I appreciate your time, and it was good getting to know you. We should stay in touch. And anyone else out there who's interested, check me out at benchmademodern.com or Edgar Blazona at Twitter or LinkedIn or something like that. So you can find me pretty easily out there.
Cool. Well, I definitely appreciate you taking time out your busy schedule to be on the show. I think it was definitely a blast, and I mean, from one tagger to another, man, it was definitely you're like the first person I've had the opportunity to kind of really dive into that psyche and talk about tagging. So I definitely appreciate you.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Well, thank you. I appreciate it too.
Good. S.A. Grant, over and out.